Well, I'd, of course, talk to our next guest about anything at all. He, of course, you watch him during the year on CBS, and then you saw him doing the Senior Bowl for NFL Network. I know he'll be doing some more draft as we get closer. He is our friend Charles Davis, and he is back with us now here on GCR. Charles, it's Glenn. It's always great to catch up with you. Thank you for taking the time for us.
Hey, thanks for having me, Glenn. Always great to talk with you.
Hey, before we get into draft and all of that, I want to get your sense, because you've done so many Ravens games over the years. The decision to move on from John Harbaugh and to bring in Jesse Minter, who feels so similar to Mike Macdonald, obviously, and we've seen what Mike Macdonald has done. But what did you make of the decision, obviously, one, to move on from John, and then for Jesse Minter to be the guy to replace him?
Yeah, the first thing is something I try to keep in mind all the time, that we cover this and we do our best to have information and all these great things. But at the end of the day, those people who go behind those doors each and every day have way more information than we do, right? They see interactions, they see how things go, all of that. The person who signs the checks, they have the right to make any move they want to make because it's their team, it's their thing. I think on the surface, you always worry, wow, we know what we have in hand. We know what we usually get done with this. They came within a field goal of going back to the playoffs after a horrific start and a ton of injuries and yada, yada, yada. But there was also the element of we just didn't get over the hump. And I think John Gruden has probably become the patron saint of that. Hey, Tony Dungy's done a magnificent job turning Tampa Bay into a heck of a team year in and year out, but they just couldn't get to the Super Bowl.
Yep.
They fired Tony Dungy despite the fact he's a winner. You remember the defensive guys going to his house, crying, missing him. Gruden comes in, they win the Super Bowl. Wow. Okay? So a lot of owners, if you were around or even if you weren't, people talk about that. Hey, sometimes you have to take that next move. Glenn, you and I have seen it in college for so many years.
Yep.
Indiana's a juggernaut now under Frank Signetti, but for years they were Indiana, right? And then they had Bill Mallory there, and Bill would win 7, 8, sometimes 9 games, right? They became a consistent bowl team, right? And what did the people in Indiana say? There's got to be the next step. He just can't get us to the next step. They fire him. Cam Cameron comes in. They go 1-10. But I mean,
took a minute. Yeah.
Right. So sometimes you got to be careful of that. It's understandable in a lot of ways from the outside in that you would hold pat, because I think Buffalo would be your fellow team this year. They would have the same thing. They're firing Sean McDermott. But if they believe the next step is there and someone else has to provide it, that's why they take those opportunities and they go. And as I keep saying, behind closed doors, they typically have more information than I do. I would tell you, from the outside in, I'm probably one was like, I don't know why you're firing John Harbaugh, but hey, if you think this is a thing, that's up to you. Same thing with Sean McDermott, but I probably feel stronger about McDermott than I do about John. Just because Steve Bisciotti has stuck with him for so many years prior. How many years in a row did they go without making the playoffs, yet he's remained the head coach?
Fair. So,
remember that one? What was it, like a 4-year stretch, Glenn, or something like that? 4-year stretch?
The end of the Joe Flacco era, yep, correct. From 15, 16,
and
17.
And in most places, most places he never would have lasted that long. So I think it was a fair run, and I can see why. Again, hey, if that's what he feels as an owner, I'm not one to question that one. Buffalo, I have a few more questions about, but that's just me.
The Minter side of it, right? Like committing to, again, the parallel to Mike Macdonald is like almost overwhelming with Jesse Minter,
makes sense.
right?
Like, it makes sense.
Committing to it being the defensive side of the ball. I know a lot of people say, hey, I'd always prefer it to be an offensive guy, but watching what the Seahawks just did, do you feel like, kind of trying to chase your own Mike Macdonald makes sense for the Baltimore Ravens?
Yeah, it certainly does, because that's familiar and it's proven to them. Remember, Mike Macdonald was in there with the franchise and essentially farmed out for a year, right, to Michigan to gain more seasoning, quote unquote, right, and then brought back into the fold and then became a head coach in the NFL. I'm not sure exactly that was, the absolute what they were thinking, But it kind of played out that way, didn't it? Played out pretty well. And by the way, his counterpart in the Super Bowl, Mike Vrabel, he's a defensive guy too. You know, the Seattle Seahawks follow a defensive guy in Pete Carroll with a defensive guy in Mike McDonald, and both have had success. Both now have Super Bowl trophies. So I'm never really caught up on the offensive defensive side, Glenn. I know it's a copycat league, and it does happen that way. And and if at one point, if you had met Sean McVay at a cocktail party, you were going to get an interview to be a head coach. I know how this league works, right? That's how it goes. I think that where the owners, in a lot of cases, miss who commands a room, who commands the respect of a team, who can galvanize a team, put them all together, and turn them loose, who can be one side of the ball or the other, but have a relationship with that quarterback and make that person play better. In this Super Bowl, Mike McDonald, great relationship with his quarterback, Sam Darnold. Mike Vrabel, great relationship with his quarterback, Drake May. Both of them defensive guys. But both of them incredible leaders of people. So that's what I'm looking for in a head coach. I think Jesse, great chops, great background, young, enthusiastic, all the things you're going to want. But also, one of the things about when you take over young as a coordinator, you get challenged in ways that people don't know, Glenn.
Yeah.
You get challenged within your own staff because those old heads on your staff are looking at you like, are you serious? This young whippersnapper going to be my coordinator? Why didn't I get the job? All those things come into play, whether people want to admit it or not. It's like watching Moneyball when they're sitting around talking about, players, and it's all those old scouts, and they come up with their bromides, He's got an ugly girlfriend, means he's got no confidence, that sort of stuff, right? But when it's a young coordinator and you're looking at veteran coaches around that table, you have to prove yourself to them as well as your team. And Jesse Minter's done that quite well along the way. That's not something people think about very often, Glenn. Trust me, it's real. Okay? I was lucky enough to take over in some positions, some leadership positions at a very young age.
Mm-hmm.
And you get challenged big time by people within. And the challenges are overt and covert. Okay? So you got to keep your head on a swivel and your eyes open at all times.
I wanted one more just on the staff for the Ravens, Charles, and that's the idea of pairing a first-time head coach in Jesse Minter with a first-time offensive play caller in Declan Doyle. Do you have any concerns about, for a team whose stated goal is to win the Super Bowl, right? Immediately, there's a reason why they fired John Harbaugh. Is that too much to ask of such a young, experienced group? Or is this just the new NFL where that doesn't matter as much as maybe it mattered in the past?
It always matters, but if you believe that person's capable, sometimes you just can't wait and go. John Gruden was an offense coordinator in the NFL in his 20s, right? Late 20s. We saw McVay took over as a head coach. What is he, still the second or third youngest coach in the NFL?
Incredible, isn't it? It's incredible.
He's been a head coach 10 years now. We can go all the way back at different times, different places, and sometimes it doesn't work. I'm not going to sit here and act like every one of them's a stroke of genius. But the next question I would have is, who else is on the staff? Because just like a baseball manager, you always hear about the bench coach, that person who is the right hand of the manager and who bounces everything off of them. And you've noticed if it's in baseball and it's a young manager, that bench coach is almost always a guy who still chews tobacco. You know what I mean? And that you can bounce off of and guide you and do those sorts of things. I'm eager to see who's around.
Well, I was going to say, does it need to be a former, I think about, obviously, Mike McDonald having Leslie Frazier on his staff, right? Huge. And my dumb guy take, Charles, my stupid sports radio host take is, it feels like, given the lack of experience in the youth, that it needs to be a former head coach on the staff, which to this point they haven't added. But Anthony Weaver has lots of experience, has been an assistant head coach. Joe Lombardi obviously has been a coordinator and is on the staff. Does it need to be, is it important to have a former head coach? Or again, is that just my dumb guy sports radio take?
It's not dumb guy sports radio take at all. It doesn't have to have, you don't have to say, hey, are you a former head coach? But are you an experienced coach? Have you been through the fires before? Have you been around? Look, before Tom Moore finally retired at the age of 408, right, in Tampa Bay. Okay? He had been around forever, right? And everybody wanted Tom Moore on their staff. You wanted a Tom Moore, okay? Someone you could bounce stuff off of and get quick, easy answers because he's seen it all, done it all. Tom Moore was never a head coach in the league. So you don't have to have a head coach.
Mm-hmm.
You got someone with the experience, with the juice, who's done it before, who will keep you from panicking under pressure, who, if you walk in their office at midnight and go, oh, my God, this is it. Hey. I remember the time, and here's what we can do. You see what I mean? That's what you're looking for. And the guys that you're naming have done all of those things.
All right, Charles Davis with us here on GCR. I think the Ravens' biggest area of need, and we can talk about the guard position, and I do think that they've got – I don't think they can come into next year and just assume that both Faalele and Voorhees are their guards. But I still think that we've been talking about it for years, that at some point they have to address edge rush. Like, it can't just be – let's hope Mike Green becomes the guy, although I get it. That's probably part of the reason why Jesse Minter is here, is the hope that you can get more out of a guy like Mike Green. But I'm going to start because I know you didn't have him at the Senior Bowl, but why is it that Ruben Bain isn't considered? Like, we just watched that guy wreck during the playoff run. Why is he not an obvious top 5 type of guy, and why could he be someone that could be in play to drop around to the area of 10? And let's talk about maybe the Ravens moving up to go get him.
If you stood him next to Myles Garrett, who is your prototype, you know what I'm saying? Like, you look at Myles Garrett and you're like, yeah, someone chiseled me an edge rusher. Bain's not going to compare to that. Okay? And I'm not saying every great rusher looks like, heck, Elmas Dumervil broke every rule going, didn't he?
Yeah, that's true.
And was a fantastic edge rusher, right? Like, too short arm, too this, too that. Every negative you wanted, you could make a case for not having him on your team or drafting him. But guess what? When it was time to play, he produced.
Player, no doubt.
That's what you're looking for. Bain is in the same type of a situation. I think when we get to the combine and all that, we start measuring, you're going to start hearing about shorter arms, which is a huge topic of discussion right now with poor Will Campbell, the left tackle for New England. But, that was a top conversation in the combine. You and I talked about it last year. Mm-hmm. Is Will Campbell going to be a tackle, or is he going to have to move inside the guard? Right? It was immediate discussion. Right now, that's raging in the New England areas, we know. But that doesn't mean he still can't be a good tackle. He had stretches this year where he played really well. Ever since he came back from injury, it's been a struggle for him. I'm wondering how much that injury bothered him, et cetera, et cetera. We can go on from there. But that's a reason I would think that you're not just sitting there and saying Bain right at the top, because he doesn't look like Jadeveon Clowney, right? He doesn't look like Myles Garrett. He doesn't look like those guys with those incredible gifts, right? That you just go, oh my God. Got to have that guy. You remember the combine when Clowney ran what, 4.63?
Yeah,
he might as well. He might as well have finished, hit that exit door at the end of the 40-yard runway, and disappeared into the night because it was over. It was a wrap right there. Now, how about his career? Never got to double-digit sacks in a season. The unfortunate part was he was a good football player.
Right, but he just didn't live to that. I understand what you're saying. He didn't really live
He didn't live up to the number one. If you're the number one overall pick, you should retire with multiple years of double-digit sacks. I'm sorry. You just should. That's why you were picked. I think he got to 9.5 once or twice. I think he got there twice. But, he was an incredible edge run defender. But guess what? They don't pay you to be an incredible edge run defender.
No, I get it.
The public doesn't exalt you for that. So that's what you're looking for. Now, Bain's run through the playoff, that was pretty tremendous. So was Mesidor's, his opposite number, who I think may have played himself into a first-round pick.
Interesting.
But if you're asking why they're not cemented at the top, that would be my initial thinking, is measurements and other things may come into play. And scouts always say the same thing. Glenn, how many times you talk to a scouter or GM or a personnel person, and they talk in comps of people?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Glenn Clark.
Yeah.
He reminds me of.
Yeah.
I don't know that Bain reminds anyone of those guys we mentioned.
the guys that were there in Mobile, if I could start with, because he's a Baltimore native, I don't think he's top half of the first round, but Derek Moore has really been nothing but a playmaker the entire time he's been at Michigan, and I know played a little more inside to start, but then moved outside. Is Derek Moore an impact NFL edge rusher?
I think he's got a chance to be one, and I think that if I remember correctly from my research, numbers really weren't there until this year.
Yeah, not like that, right?
Not like that, right? And this past year, and to your point, some of it was where he was playing, some of it is what you're asked to do on defense. Numbers aren't the be-all, end-all, but I always look for them to see what the production is. Because I keep coming back to Chop Robinson at Penn State. People just kept going bonkers, right? To date, I kept saying, well, if he's the greatest thing since sliced bread, how does he only have 4.5 sacks in the college game? I mean, he can't be getting chipped by 5 people every play now. What's the deal? And everybody just kept, oh, no, he's this. I don't think he's lived up to it so far, okay, in 2 seasons now, all right? Adafe Owe.
Yep.
Remember when he came out? He had 0 sacks his senior year.
None.
And I was like, whoa, okay, he didn't even stumble into one? Like, nothing? And he was a good player for Baltimore. The weird part was, going back to Jesse Minter, the first game he played for the Chargers, my crew was lucky enough to do that game. I think he had 2 sacks right out of the gate. So maybe Jesse Minter knew how to bring it out. I don't know. So maybe that bodes well for people in Baltimore. But Derek Moore had a great Senior Bowl week, and he had a really good last season at Michigan. I think he's a guy, I'm not sure, that, as you said, that he's going to be top of the first round, but he's a really good player, and I think he's done nothing but increase the momentum for himself as he moves forward. Had a really good week in Mobile.
Someone who does look like they could be in that area of the draft is T.J. Parker from Clemson. Is he an immediate day one impact type of edge rusher?
In 2024, you would have said yes.
Mm-hmm.
In 2025, he had 2 sacks going into the last game of the regular season, then got 3 against South Carolina to get himself to 5. Once again, numbers aren't everything, but I'm gonna be watching tape and asking a lot of questions. Why such a loss in production? Was the blocking kick so hard towards him that he just couldn't make plays? Like, you got to ask. That's what all the scouts are going to be doing. They're going to be very thorough about it. We have a decent number of guys who had better years in 24 than they did in 25. They're going to have to answer some questions. But T.J. Parker has that look. He looks like a heck of a player. I think he had a good week, Senior Bowl week, during the time that he was there. But again, I'm this is my own personal bias. Why such a drop in production? What happened?
Right.
Was the team, did the whole thing at Clemson infect him too, where his production went down? I just want to know what happened there, and maybe I'll get an answer that satisfies me. I don't know. But he does have that look. The only thing is, I was actually talking with a scout recently, and you know how it gets, Glenn. Some things you just can't get out of your head.
Mm-hmm.
Vic Beasley coming out of Clemson.
Oh, wow.
That monster year with Atlanta, you remember, was like 14.5 sacks, 7 forced fumbles, the whole thing. That may have been the last play he made in the NFL.
Great point. God, I hadn't thought about Vic Beasley in a minute, Charles. God, that's a great comparison.
And I'm telling you, this scout was like, I know I shouldn't bring it up, but I'm going to tell you something. That Vic Beasley thing really scarred me there.
Wow.
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 But the thing was, Vic Beasley didn't love football. You got to find T.J. Parker loves football, which I'm betting he loves football more than Vic Beasley did, because Vic just didn't love football. He was just gifted. That's what it was. What he was.
Anyone else that you saw down there? And again, I don't think any of them are top half, where the Ravens are picking types of picks, but guys that maybe in later rounds. I know Zion Young was someone.
Zion Young was good at coming out of Missouri. Another player, 6'5", 260 something. I think he's going to be a good player for people coming off the edge. I thought he had a really good week. There's a kid that, when you start molding the clay, Kieron Crawford came out of high school, more of a basketball kid. I think 1 year of high school football. I think it's all out there ahead of him now. Numbers aren't going to jump off the charts, but the gifts are. Gabe Akis, from Illinois, another defensive end, edge rusher, did a nice job during the week. Um, T.J. Parker, you mentioned. The guy who gets overlooked had a monster year. Go up and go punch in the numbers, punch in some tape, Glenn. Nadeem Tucker, Western Michigan. Now, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with him because he's not quite 6'2". Okay, he's 6'0", 246, hand nine, the whole deal. Arm is just, 32, 32 and an eighth. But this kid got home a lot last year, rushing the passer. Now, here's the kicker. The year before, I believe he's at the University of Houston, played in one game. Got to do homework. Why did he only play in one game at Houston? Then he goes to Western Michigan. And I did the little bit I could do, Glenn. I don't believe it was injury. I don't believe he, missed the season due to injury, and that's why he only played one game. So you got to find out what the story was there, and then how did he convert that to having such a big year at Western Michigan? Because he acquitted himself nicely at the Senior Bowl. And a kid that I have my eye on who, again, had a much better 2024 than he did 2025. Not the most dynamic kid going, but he always finds the football. He's always around it, whether in coverage or rushing. And that's Keon Sloan, North Carolina State. Just one of those kids who just kept popping up for me. You know what I mean? Just kept looking. I say, man, I like this kid. And, of course, Dennis Sutton from Penn State. Good, hard, tough, physical kid, sets an edge well, knows how to play. We got to be real careful that we don't just get these kids swallowed up because Penn State has such a disappointing season after being touted so highly that sometimes we take the kids along with us. We go, oh, man, that was miserable for them. And then maybe I'm downgrading the kid all the way through, and that might not be the fair thing because he's another one who had a nice week at the Senior Bowl.
If the Ravens go edge or defensive line, I know everybody's got the Peter Woods from Clemson in that area in round one. If that's the route they go, can you find me a prototype wide receiver later on in the draft? Someone, I'm not casting aside Rashad Bateman. I happen to be a Rashad Bateman fan, but it really does sort of feel like the Ravens are still missing that kind of X-factor prototype wide receiver to go along with Zay Flowers.
Yeah, I think you can find guys. I really do, Glenn. I said this 2 years ago, and I stand by it. I think as long as we're playing football in the style that we're playing right now, every year we will go into the NFL draft and say, the wide receiver group's pretty deep.
Yeah. I always love it when someone tells me it's I think we have had this conversation. When someone tells me it's a down year for wide receivers, and I'm like, yeah, and we're going to find 5 who are rock stars.
We are. And I take it this way. At my age, when I was younger, I'll just use the state of Texas as a great example. Everybody who loved college football in the state of Texas, which everyone did, they all wore jersey numbers that were running back numbers when they played in the backyard.
Sure.
They were all playing, some version of I formation, wishbone, and that guy carried it 30 times in the big games, right? That and a quarterback pitched the ball more than he threw it. Now with 7-on-7s and the camps and the proliferations and the whole thing, look at the number of quarterbacks we get out of the state of Texas.
Yep.
We get pitchers and catchers now, as opposed to we used to get runners. There are going to be plenty of receivers there. I don't know that we had all the top line guys, if any of them at the Senior Bowl. But the receivers that acquitted themselves best for me, Malachi Fields at Notre Dame, the Virginia transfer, he will remind you of a Ravens receiver in a big way. Big body kid, makes a lot of plays over the top. Is he really the guy that gets deep on you and just scares the heck out of you with his speed? I don't think so. See where I'm going? Like he's all the Ravens receivers save. Who's your little guy, little slot guy?
Zay,
who's so great?
Yeah. Zay Flowers.
Yeah. Save Zay Flowers, right? Isn't that kind of the carve out that you've had of Ravens receivers over the last X number of years?
Yep.
So that's what we have. We'll see how it all shakes out. It goes, but he's the guy who caught my eye the most while we were there. There are guys who can run a little bit. A Chris Hilton Jr. from LSU. A Barian Brown from LSU. They could run. Ted Hirsch from Georgia State emerged. But are they at the top of the food chain? No, they're not.
I tend to agree with everything you just said, which is always the case whenever you and I chat, Charles. That's normally the way it works.
You're awfully kind. I'll tell you what, you're awfully kind.
Charles, what's the plan for you? Where are we going to be seeing you? When are we going to be hearing you? Are you going to be doing some mocks? What's the next couple of months look like?
Yeah. I've got a ton of work to do, as you know. Catch up with everybody, working on this draft stuff. Continue to do that. Working my way through that. Combine will be coming up in a couple of weeks. I'll be there for the combine, and then I'll be doing mock drafts. Where actually, it's funny you mentioned actually working today with someone at NFL Network to map out my schedule about how many mock drafts I will do.
Okay.
Whether it be 3, and I know they're trying to get me to 4, which we're going to have a major discussion about because I'm going to counter with 2.
Yeah, how much can really change? That's always the difficult part. How much is really
I'll
changing?
counter with 2, and they'll counter with 6, and we'll just kind of we'll figure it out. But I think I'll probably do 3 or 4 mock drafts before the whole thing's over, with the only one that I count being the last one I turned in the day before the draft.
That sounds good to me. Charles, we always appreciate it. We can't wait to catch up again as we get a little bit closer. Thank you for taking the time for us today.
Hey, thanks for everything, Glenn. You take care of yourself. Have a great, successful offseason. Here we go, trying to find players again everywhere.
Thank you, brother.
All right, be good.